Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we're taking a look at something that is really different and very cool. This is an Elijah Isham design. It's built by We Knives, and this is known as the Arrakis. Now, let me start by asking a really critical question to this whole conversation, and that is, what is your immediate response to this knife? Do you look at this and go, wow, that is one of the coolest things I've ever seen? Or okay, do you look at that and go, why, that is the stupidest thing imaginable. Why would anyone buy something like that when you clearly can't use it for, your typical knife uses, okay? And I'll grant you that, but I'm going to submit that this is a really cool knife. I like it a whole lot, and I actually recommend it for the people that it's designed for, okay? And so, look, this is a piece of knife artwork, right? It is a sculpture. It's a piece of manufacturing prowess, and a great example of what can be done with just the incredible abilities that, as modern man, we have available to us. If you think of, the simplest folding knife, like maybe an Opinel or something, they're so many miles apart. And, this wouldn't even be possible given much of the technology that would be associated with the Opinel. The other thing that I have to say is, even just the act of making this, like if you think of let's say let's say you drew this picture and asked a custom knife maker to build it for you. Imagine the work and the cost that would go into building something like this, and consider that, we can crank these out in the thousands. All right, so there are a lot of things to consider here. Now, the other thing we haven't even touched on is the design itself, and that Elijah was able to, bring something like this out of his mind. The guy is very creative, okay? But furthermore, to come up with something that's this different and this unique, and yet still make it function at all is pretty impressive. Okay, I've seen lots of art knives before, and I've scrolled through, pictures from knife shows and stuff like that. And a lot of art knives, you look at them and you can't even figure out, like, I don't even think a human hand can go on that knife, right? This is not that, okay? It's very artistic, it's very interesting, but you can still, you can still work it, okay? I can figure out how to open it and close it. I can figure out how to hold it, and guess what? You can even cut stuff with it, all right? So I've got to give a lot of credit. This is to me is a piece of artwork, and it's beautiful. It really is. Furthermore, let me say that I am pretty glad that I live in a world, and I'm part of a knife community. I'm an enthusiast an area, in a discipline where something like this exists. And I also have to say this: I've got to give We Knives some credit for making this. All right. I think a lot of manufacturers would, they care about the bottom line. They have to. And it would be tempting or easy, I guess, to look at this and go, no way, right? There's too much milling. There's too much work. It's not going to sell. Like, people are going to look at that and go, what do you even do with it? It's a pretty big risk to make something like this. Now, I will say, Elijah Isham's name is a bit of a drawing card, although he's been around for a while, and we've seen a few things along these lines. And so perhaps, he is not as popular as he once was. And I think that's definitely something worth considering. And yet again, We Knives was willing to take the risk and make this. And for my, for whatever it's worth, and that's not very much, I'm really glad that this exists. I'm really glad that We Knives made it. Well, I totally understand, okay, that this knife is not for everyone, right? I absolutely get it. If your idea of, a perfect knife is this, all right, then yeah, this looks like something from outer space. And it actually does look like something from outer space. Excuse me, guys. Sorry about that. but it looks like something really cool from outer space, right? I joked in the first impressions that if a xenomorph carried a knife, this would be the folding knife that I would expect them to carry. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into some of the details. Now that I've given you my explanation for this and why I actually think this is really cool, well, I totally get why some people would think that it's the dumbest thing ever. All right, size and weight on this, 8 inches overall, 3.5 inches on the blade length there, 4 and 9/16 on the handle. Grip area here. Now, grip area is something that I'm not in love with. Only 3 inches. So there's actually just a little bit of space. And I do feel in this grip here, like I'm a little bit cramped, like I could use a little more space, okay? Now, once I choke up and get up into that choil, then it's different. I don't feel as uncomfortable, but we'll talk about that when we get into ergonomics in a little bit. By the way, the weight on this is 3.77 ounces, which, for an 8-inch titanium frame lock is pretty good, especially this is a fairly thick knife. If you look at the stock on the titanium and the blade itself, it's fairly hefty stock. And so 3.77 ounces is pretty cool. And by the way, if you look at it, there's no secret as to how they, where that extra weight went. They've removed it. All right. It's almost like a spider web type design here. So let's move on to the blade. Okay, so this blade is M390, great steel. All right, not that I think a lot of people are running around doing a lot of cutting with this, but it's a flat grind, sort of a partial flat grind, if you will. We've got a finger choil here. We've got sort of this back cutout here, which is really nice. Top swedge, really, really nice satin finish. And then there's this fuller-ish thing going on here with the cutouts in the blade. Now, I think this is really interesting, and here's why. A lot of times when you see a knife like this, like you would go, okay, the handle being all relieved like this and cut out is really, really cool. But surely you're not going to do that on the blade, okay? But they're like, no, we're going to do that on the blade. And so it actually, the flow of this knife is really nice. It really is. And I think something would be lost if we got rid of all of this and just made this flat. Now, something would be gained as well. I get that in a function versus form discussion. I'll grant for sure something would be gained. But I kind of like that, this is a little bit different and trying to do some things that we don't normally see. All right, now I will say there are weaknesses to this blade, guys. There are. Again, I don't think a lot of people are buying this to be their EDC knife, but if they are, there's going to be some little challenges here. First of all, this gets in this whole back portion of the blade, so between my thumbs here, okay, the wedge effect is quite substantial. This gets very thick very quickly. Now out here toward the tip, it's not quite as bad. And so overall, this is not the knife that I'm going to use to, I don't know, cut up some apples for my kids or cut up a carrot. But if I've got if I've got some light EDC cutting tasks to do, this will do those tasks reasonably well. Okay, it's not going to be my first choice as, I'm going to jump out of a helicopter and survive in the woods for a week. This is not the knife I'm taking. Okay, by the way, I'm not going to take a folding knife at all. Hopefully I won't be jumping out of any helicopters in the near future. But as I say, if I was, right, this is not primarily built to be a cutting tool. All right. So yes, this may not be the best blade for cutting stuff, but it's really cool. Okay. It really is. And that I appreciate. Okay. Let's carry on to some of the other features here. So moving on to the action, this is built by We Knives, and so big surprise, it is a very smooth action, very, very well done. It's sort of a bolsterish lock, if you will, very, very smooth. Detent is pretty darn good. All right. So that aspect of this knife is actually pretty good. And if you're one of those people who primarily buys knives so that you can, I don't know, sit on the couch when you're watching movies or sit at your desk at work and flip them open, this will serve that purpose pretty well for you. And And I know that some of you really do look for that. Okay, so I know I'll get some feedback in the comments. It's funny whenever I talk about a fidget knife, people are like, "What are you doing fidgeting with your knife?" Well, some people like to do that. Okay, I don't find myself doing it all the time, but certainly I can appreciate the attention to detail that it takes to get a really nice action. Now, construction and handle ergonomics. All right, this is where we talk about this part of the knife. All right, there's a couple of cool things here that I think we need to notice. First of all is how this is built. So notice we have this back portion, the green, okay, anodized in such a, I mean, built in such a way that it's as if they started out to make an integral folder, right? So you've got this. If you look over here on the inside, you've got the lock coming all the way up to here. You've got the internal, you've got the show side coming all the way up to here. But then, okay, they stop there and they finish the knife with these overlays, if you will, or the rest of the frame of the knife. And it's a really, really neat process. And I'll be interested, okay, it's cool to see it here in a knife that maybe is not the most practical thing in the world, but it's also perhaps more interesting to think of how we might see this design used in future knives, because I think it's a really cool feature. All right, the next thing we've got to touch on is the machining. And of course, guys, it's extensive. By the way, really, really love that green ano with a bit of a stonewash. We does this on a number of their models, and I really, really like it every time. Sort of a blasted finish on the front portion of the knife. Still got the WE logo there, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. I kind of wish they would have done something else, although I get it. A knife that's this detailed and this much of a showcase of your manufacturing, you got to put your name on it. Okay, so I'm not complaining about that. And it is Torx construction, which is nice to see. Single position pocket clip, big surprise there. This is not a knife that lends itself to having multiple positions. It's a form first type of knife. All right. Now, thinking of this for a second, this does land in an unfortunate spot. A number of other reviewers have commented on this. Now, I don't find it as bad. A couple of reviewers, sort of talked about it as if, it's just completely not functional. And, just, I'm not going to get the camera out or anything, but if I just take a second, all right, you can see this hand is over here. So I've only got one hand on the knife. I can one-handed slide this knife into my pocket. All right, it takes a little bit of effort and get it back out again. So, all right, so the knife went in my pocket, it came back out. I only used one hand. To me, that's a pass. All right, it's not easy. All right, but I've had knives that don't have anything weird going on like this. All right, that don't go in pocket easily one-handed. So the fact that this goes in and comes out, that kind of gets a pass from me, although it could have been better. They really could have reworked this area somehow to allow that to work a little bit better. All right. Of course, guys, the way this is built is crazy. It's intricate, it's detailed, it's visually very interesting. You can see the layers, you can see the blade through the handle when it's closed. It's really, really intricate and detailed and very interesting from just as an art piece. It's very, very cool. And I will say that anyone who looks at this knife, and I've had a couple of people where I kind of like, hey, look at this. And they're like, whoa, like what even is that? That is crazy. And they know I'm a knife guy, so they sort of expect something. Now I will say this, I have, by showing a few of my friends this, I've forever ruined it for, the next time I show them a Spyderco, they're going to be like, whatever, compared to that knife from space, this is no big deal. Okay. Let's quickly touch on ergonomics. There are a couple of things here where, and again, guys, you have to keep in mind what we're talking about here. This is a piece that definitely puts form over function. One of the things I wish they would have found a way to do this handle a little bit differently. All right, if I'm back here and I'm not using this choil, I definitely feel a little cramped. All right, now if I move up onto the choil, it feels better, but I really feel like I've got to have my thumb here. If I try to move it back, it just doesn't feel right. This is how it feels really, really nice. Now, I will say this is comfortable. I have no problem with this, except notice that I lose a good portion of cutting edge here. So I end up, with 2 inches of blade that I'm going to be practically using, which is not the way I usually use my knives. Now, again, I know that not everyone is going to be, most people buying this are not buying it for their next EDC knife. And I will grant, I've got to give Elijah Isham a lot of credit. The fact that you could carry this knife, right? As I said, I wouldn't want to carry it out in the wilderness, but for a day at the office, right? This is totally fine for a day, going shopping with your wife or walking around, whatever. This is completely functional, even though it looks completely outlandish, which is pretty stinking impressive. All right, now, having gotten all of those things out of the way, a couple of quick comparisons. Now, guys, I'm not going to, I've done a full comparison between this and the 037, which I really like, but I wanted to bring in this knife in particular, okay? Because it's the detail, it's the visual stimulation of this knife that makes it so cool, okay? And it's really there. It is really, really incredible. But let me say that I don't need a knife to be this crazy to be cool. All right, I find this knife every bit as attractive. This is the Riot Knives Torrent, and I like the fact that this is fairly simple. There's just a few little things. There's these milled lines here. There's a little pop of color at the back, and I love the anodization in that little chamfered corner there. I love that. Some holes there in the clip, and just a little pop of blue. So what I'm saying here is sometimes less is more. Now, this is definitely a more is more type of knife, and it's really well carried off, and I think Elijah does a great job of that. I'm not going to bring in a lot of comparisons just because what are you going to compare this to, right? I guess a Custom Knife Factory Decepticon or a Wee Knife Eschaton. So I'll throw a pair of two in there, and that'll be my last comparison just to give you an idea of what we're dealing with for size. Okay, so if you've been watching all along, you pretty well at this point know what I think of this knife. It's a really, really cool piece of manufacturing. It's a really, really cool design. Elijah, your brain is a pretty impressive thing. The fact that you could conceive of this, and even more, the fact that we live in a world where something like this could be made and manufactured for public consumption is really, really cool. And I love this knife for that reason. I love the fact that you can have something that is a piece of functional artwork. Although I would say there are some points that I raised that I think are important for consideration, right? If you're buying this knife and it's not going to just sit on a shelf, then you really need to watch carefully and listen to those points that I've made along the way about limitations to its usefulness. Okay, and there are some. We're not going to hide that at all. That said, while those limitations are in mind, I still think this is a really, really cool thing. I love the fact that it exists, and I enjoy it immensely. All right, I don't carry it that often, I don't use it that often, and I don't know that I'll keep it long term, but it does offer a lot of joy just to be able to check this out and share it with you guys. Thanks for watching. Go pick one of these up over at White Mountain Knives. Use my discount code. I'll put a link in the description box, and as well as that code, which is Sharp Stuff, by the way. Again, thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.